All right. What time is it? It's about noon. We're going to get started here in a few seconds, and then we'll introduce everybody here. This is giving me COVID vibes. For some reason, that when we had COVID, I remember doing a lot of webinars like this. So yeah, I am Olivia Huey. I'm the director of counseling here at Mater Day, and I'm joined with our team members here and our guest speaker, Jonathan Malali. So we're going to go around and introduce ourselves and maybe how long we've been at Mater Day and our favorite activity in high school. I know that some families have done that in our meetings, but we'll go ahead and hear from our counselors and our guest speaker. So I'm Olivia Huey. I've been here now 7 months, and my favorite activity in high school was ASB. I was secretary, treasurer, and president.
Nice. Good fact to know.
Go
I'm Mary
ahead.
Beth Nguyen. I'm one of the counselors here. This is my fifth year at Mater Dei. And I went to Mater Dei, and in high school at Mater Dei, I did a little bit of everything. It took me a while to find my place. And freshman, sophomore year, kind of just finding my footing. I tried a couple of different things. Um, I had to take PE because I didn't pick an elective with my counselor. So I'm glad we're going to do that right now together. And yeah, I did swim and also lacrosse. How about
Any
Monica?
Monica, yeah, popcorn.
My name is Mrs. Oh, sorry. My name is Mrs. Pena Gautier. I've been at Mater Dei for 13 years, 10 of those years as school counselor. In high school, I enjoyed leadership, so ASB, but I was also part of dance, and so I enjoyed that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Monica Celaya. I'm one of the newest members of the counseling team. I've been here. That's the running joke right now. I'm counting the weeks. I think we're on week 7 or 8. And my favorite activity in high school, I was part of the volleyball team and I also threw shot put. So, made some really awesome friends that I still keep in touch with today.
My name's Mr. Walto. I'm a second year counselor here at Mater Dei. During high school, I took French all 4 years, so I was part of the French club. So that was really fun, just fundraising.
I'm Mrs. Guzman, fourth year at Mater Dei. Probably the best experience in high school was playing soccer.
Great. That's it, everybody. Okay, perfect. So let me go ahead and share a poll and relaunch poll, relaunch, and then we're going to see who's in the audience today. If you can answer the poll, awesome. And while they're answering, Jonathan, can you help instruct me on how to chat with one another? Can you send me a chat or no?
Let's see. Uh, it doesn't look like the chat is active.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So we have 57 participants in here. This is awesome. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the results. Okay, share results. All right. Do you guys see the results? Yeah, good. So we have about, about half and half. And most people are pretty confident in the academic planning process, not so much in the college process. And some people need a hug to get through this. This is great. And that's what we're here for, giving you a virtual hug as we walk through the information today. So we're just joined by Myra. Myra, do you want to introduce yourself? Maybe she's having a little bit of trouble. That's okay. We'll get back to her. So we're going to go ahead and start the presentation. All right. Let's go here. Everybody can see the presentation. And then counselors, you can take your face off until you're ready to go, which would be fine. Okay, so actually, we'll go ahead and start in a prayer. We'll say the Hail Mary in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. So thank you all for being here today. We're going to give a brief overview of our presentation. We're going to go through the college admissions process and how to stand out, how to get started, the timeline, how Naviance is used, the importance of college research, how to create your list, the modern day resources that we have on campus, the use of independent consultants, and then Jonathan Mullally has a presentation on testing. So I'm going to be pretty transparent with you all. The reason why we are showing this presentation to both sophomores and freshmen now is because we recently just did a college junior kickoff or a junior student parent kickoff for college admissions. And a lot of the feedback that we received from the junior parents, not so much from the students' feedback was like, we want snacks, maybe provide cookies. But the parents did say it would be nice to hear this earlier. So hence, we're giving the same information, obviously not as intensive, but just so that you all are aware of what's to come. And we're not sharing this with students because, it can be overwhelming, but parents, it's definitely important for you all to know what's to come and to be prepared. So most of our freshmen and sophomores have had their meetings. Some of you will be having your meetings. And if you haven't signed up for a meeting, please do so or reach out to your counselor to do so because our goal is to complete all those meetings and course selections the Thursday or Wednesday before spring break. So I encourage you to do that ASAP. So in those meetings, we went through a graduation requirement overview, the transcript, how to read a transcript, and understanding the GPA, because there's like 4 to 6 GPAs on the transcript. We went through a 4-year planning exercise for the students so that they can see, if they needed summer school or what the trajectory was for, especially for math and science and language. And then we went through Naviance and reintroduced the students, at least the freshmen, through the self-discovery assessments, how to use that tool to research careers in colleges, and how to build their resume on there. I just recently met with a rising senior and we're working through the resume for her. And it's nice for freshmen and sophomores to fill that out now so that you don't have to, she had to sit there and recall everything that she accomplished and did. Whereas if you just did it in Naviance, it would be good to go by the time our students apply to college. And then we're doing course selections. And we're inputting those into Aerie so that we can build the master schedule in a timely manner. And then we went through a brief testing timeline and some summer opportunities and summer plans. So essentially, the philosophy of our counseling department is that fit is very important. We say college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. And this is Frank Bruni. He wrote a book, Where You Go Is Not Who You Will Become. I always say who you go is who you will be, who you will meet and how you will form and develop. And so it's important to understand fit. And, in terms of fit, what is a sense of they have to find a sense of belonging. So are the students going to find their people? What are their values? Are they going to find similar people in that way to continue to grow into the young men and women that God intended them to be? Retention is important. Are students coming back? Are they happy at that university or college? If they need to save money, if they find fit, usually they don't transfer. And when you transfer, you usually can lose credits, and in the outcome is losing some money. And then having a balanced list when they just apply to say like, okay, I know UCLA, USC are good schools, and Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo and Harvard. And you're like, well, and then they start to apply to a lot of different schools. Sometimes it's not balanced and it adds to anxiety and confusion. And that's going to reduce stress and anxiety in the process. And we can think about, do they want to be a big fish in a small pond? Smaller, medium-sized schools might be good for those students, and really being open to that versus a small fish in a big pond where they're just a number. And then graduate school admissions, if that's an important piece. A lot of our students want to go on to business school, med school, graduate school. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay. And then I think that I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Monica.
Hi. So when you understand the importance of fit and how it plays into just these long-term goals, it's easier to realize that there really is a college for everyone, even for our friend Buddy the Elf. Next slide.
Sorry, my bad.
So so one of the things that we really focus on in the counseling department is getting past names, right? So understanding that idea that name recognition only goes so far. We often only hear about a top very, very small percentage of schools in rankings lists over and over again. And what we sometimes overlook is that there are thousands and thousands of other schools that could potentially be some amazing fits and some hidden gems for these for our students. So it's important to look beyond the name and consider some of those fit factors, which we'll cover in a future slide. But actually asking yourselves or asking your students to find 5 to 7 reasons why you like this school, and going beyond that just name recognition factor, right? And so when we realize that, we can realize that we can be successful pretty much anywhere. And here's a nice little sampling of some famous people, successful alumni that can be found in different places. So we've got actors like Steve Carell, who came from Denison University in Ohio, and Martha Stewart, who went to Barnard in New York. And then you have the former executive director of the NCAA who went to Albion College in Michigan. And the famous George Lucas, who started out at a community college in Modesto and then transferred to USC. Everyone knows who George Lucas is, right? And then our very own principal, Miss Frances Clare, who attended the University of San Francisco. So again, really making use of the opportunities that are available at whatever institution you're at is really key, much more than the name of the school that you're going to. Next slide. So what does fit mean? That can mean a very wide variety of things for each student, right? And so often we categorize this into 3 different areas: personal, academic, and financial. So if we think about, the personal factors, maybe, oftentimes people will look at location. Do I want to stay in state versus out of state? My proximity to home or to an airport, accessibility, things like that. For the academic fit, are there major options for me, academic programs that I'm interested in, and things like that. And then the financial piece, which is a very important piece to consider, right? The cost and the affordability and the resources that I have available to me to pay for school. Those are some of the categories that we often consider. Next slide. And so here's kind of a sampling of 13 specific factors to consider. This is not an exhaustive list. I think this is some of the most common factors, but students and families can take this and really run with it. Things, as I mentioned, like location, as Mrs. Huey mentioned, size, the academic offerings, how much debt students are graduating with is a very real topic that more and more families are bringing up. If you're looking at 6 figures of debt for a bachelor's degree, is that worth it to you? Only you guys can answer that question. But things like internship and research opportunities, if that's important to your student. If you are, say, for example, one of our MAPS students in our MAPS program, finding institutions that have the resources that you need, the accommodations that you need to be a successful student, could be one of those fit factors to look into. Graduation rates, obviously, and other things, other organizations to get involved with are all super important factors to consider. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Mrs. Nguyen, who will talk about getting to know yourself.
Okay, so the big part in high school are things that you're not always graded on. And in high school, we are graded on the classes that we have to spend so much time and homework on. But getting to know yourself is just so important because you're growing as a human, and all of the factors that you're doing are going to lead up to where you want to go spend your time after high school, too. So, getting to know yourself while in high school is a huge to-do list item, especially as a freshman and sophomore. So, even though we might not have, you might not be able to work on actual college applications until senior fall, or even preparing early in junior year, like getting to know yourself first is just really important. So, doing more things that come naturally to your student, giving them opportunities to just grow into who they are becoming is huge. So finding out, what they like is just leaning into that, finding out what kind of weather that they like. Like, is that going to affect where they want to apply to college? Snow and ice is difficult, but would that experience be good for your student as a person at some point in time? Catholic or Christian communities, Newman Center is huge. So having that religious aspect to be part of that, if that's an important priority to kind of build their faith. Flights to and from colleges. How close is the nearest airport? If we're going to be flying out of state or way up north, what does that look like for transportation and budget? Cost of living, room and board, as including dorming and food, or because there's off-campus apartments over time, or are we going to commute from home? So kind of driving to and from, living local, or kind of hopping straight out of high school into college. Getting out of their comfort zone and growing as a person, but not so far out of it that they don't know who they are or that they don't find their own people or their natural strengths and interests. So getting to know yourself is a huge part of the whole college exploration process, even before it starts. Next. And how to build a college balance list is something that is going to really come to mind when you're in the middle of it, because each app is going to range from, maybe some college apps are free to apply to, but on average, they're $40 to $80 per application. And so in order to build a list of schools that you're happy with and have the most chance of getting into in this time of senior year. So right now our seniors are really waiting to hear back from some of their colleges still. And to have the highest chances of getting in there while also being on a reasonable budget, we would recommend applying to 8 to 10 schools, 6 to 12 if that's more. And that way we can kind of budget our time and our money and our energy to making a balanced list. So applying to 2 likelies, 2 targets, and 2 reaches gets you a pretty balanced list at easier schools to get into, medium schools with a chance to get into, and then the hard schools that are just objectively can be difficult, lower acceptance rates just because they're very popular topics. So 1 to 2 schools in their reach category, if their average GPA and test scores are above yours or accept less than 20% of students. Target schools are in the middle of that bell curve where they're the middle 50%. And the likely schools typically have either they accept more than 75% of their students, or that if it lines up with what you've taken in college, that's more likely fit. And the most important thing when it comes to likely schools is that you also have to love it in order to apply for, spend time and money and energy applying to those schools. Even if they're likely schools to get into, you have to love it because your safer schools have to be something you're excited about because it's a very possibility that you could be attending there. And doing the equal research on giving it the time and energy is something that you want to make worth your time. And any more than 10 schools can cause way too much stress and panic and, designated time. So we don't want to apply to more than 10 or 12 schools. Truly, I know that some people say that they've applied to 20 or 30, and that is just so much time and money and stress. So we want to make sure that you have a balanced list. And Naviance as a research tool. So Naviance is a great tool that we use as a school. We actually subscribe to it as a school, so the account is free for you. And one really strong reason I like to share this, aside from it has a lot of tools, is that there's no targeted ads or there's no outside, sponsorships to kind of push certain schools. This is very objective data, and it can help you find a college list of factors that align exactly with what you're interested in. Self-discovery assessments, there's personality strengths tests that won't necessarily tell you your future like a crystal ball, but if you take the personality and strengths inventories, they can give you ideas in ways that maybe your student hasn't seen themselves before. And a lot of different careers exist, and hearing about the unexpected careers out there is just a good opportunity for learning about the world and what jobs that they can do with a business degree or a health degree or anything like that. So Naviance is a great tool. There's career resources. There's a resume builder that's very much automated. So when you put in maybe every activity at a time, I always say focus on service hours and write them down when you do the service hours. So service hours, put them in mobile serve on that app that's on your student's iPad for tracking for the graduation requirement, but also keeping a nice organized list for yourself that's ideally on a resume. That way, when it comes time to college applications, they're already all there together. So you don't have to rack your mind of what did I do freshman year? So making a resume is huge, and Naviance can do that. And another huge part of Naviance is the more that students use it, the more data we have to share. And using scattergrams to find out where modern day students are going after graduating is a huge aspect to look at and see what is the average acceptance rate for the university when you Google it, but also what is the average acceptance rates for modern day students. And we can see over time when the more people use it, that schools can be statistically interesting to see how many students have applied to schools versus how many are going. So we haven't been using it as much as we've needed to post-COVID, but now that we're coming just back to using Naviance, we can see that like in 2021, we had data that said 27 students applied to this university, Notre Dame, and 6 were accepted and 3 enrolled. So according to this data, the more we use it, the more accurate it can be as a tool for you and future generations, including this. So this is an average GPA for Notre Dame. It might say, here's a range. So we can see that on this line, their average acceptances are really high weighted GPAs. Notre Dame is an extremely rich school. And this is of modern day students who input their data correctly. You can see that if, yes, you have students who were accepted with a 3.6, but it's way less statistically probable. It may depend on their rigor, their essays, their stories, so many other factors that go into that. And you just want to align your rigor in academics and your essays with the colleges that you fall in love with.
Thank you, Mrs. Nguyen. I'll go ahead and stay on the scattergram slide here. One of the important things to know about the Naviance scattergrams is they are a very powerful tool, and it helps students and families understand college admission trends. The neat feature about the scattergrams is that it uses historical data from our modern day students. So these are graduates from modern day, and they have self-reported their GPA, their SAT or ACT scores. And it really shows you how the test scores and the GPA align with like the admission trends for the respective school that you're looking at. We will definitely go into more detail, in particular in junior year, but any time that we meet with a student and a family and we are reviewing these scattergrams, we'll definitely give you more information. I want to switch gears into the factors in admission. College admissions decisions are based on a variety of factors, and understanding them can truthfully help your student present the strongest application. So as you look at your screen, you see a few factors here that are considered. And within those factors on the right-hand side, you can see how considerable the importance is regarding the factors on the left-hand side. So obviously the high school grades in our courses are probably one of the highest considerable importance. And then as you take a look, you can see how it measures within the entire admission factor. We're going to go into the next slide and a few of the considerations for admissions. It's important to note here that there are factors that you can control and then factors that you can't control. On the left-hand side, there's a list of 10 factors that is in your control. So students, we will help them fine-tune their applications. And on the left-hand side, for example, your academic excellence. How well prepared is that transcript? Standardized test. How well did the student prepare for SAT or ACT? Applications, that's where the student's voice comes in. So definitely making sure that you're answering the prompt and that you have many eyes reviewing it before the student is submitting their application. So those are some of the examples of factors you can control. And on the right-hand side of your screen, there's 3 factors that you can't control. You can't control the priority of the colleges. What are they looking for from year to year? Impacted majors. Nursing and business tend to be one of those really impacted majors at a lot of universities. And then, one thing that you can't control are the reader's mood while they're reading the application or any biases that they have. And while they're not supposed to carry those in, that's where the human side comes in, right? So those are some of the factors that you can't control. So we here at Modern Day focus on the factors that we can control. And then if we go into the next slide, some of the academic factors that we will definitely help throughout the years are things like our transcript, making sure that we understand how to read it, making sure that we understand that growth within the academic component and growth within our transcript is really important. Those are some of the things that we discussed in the freshman and also will be discussing in the sophomore visits that we have. The rigor of classes. So are you meeting the prerequisites? Are you challenging yourself? Are you taking the highest level course that you possibly can? And if you're not quite there yet, how can we get you there? Grades in the classes, as I mentioned earlier, the trends, GPA, that's another significant factor. And so all of those speak to the academic excellence. And then when we discuss the standardized test, we definitely want to consider things like, does the school have a test optional or test blind? And if they are there still considerations that we maybe should be taking the exam? And will the exam help us in the application process? Do they super score? Do they provide scholarship opportunities? So these are just a couple of the other academic factors within the college admission process. And again, this is all just to give you the information ahead of time, but it's definitely not to stress you out at this point. It's so that we can be aware of all of the different considerations, and we'll help you through that process. So I think I'm handing it over to Mrs. Martinez.
Thank you, Mrs. Pena. Now, as far as personal factors, right? A lot of the questions we get is letters of recommendations, and our students will need eventually letters of recommendations. Junior, senior year, we go heavy on what the process is. This year specifically, our junior class, we kind of change our culture as to letter recommendation packet, process, checklist, what's needed, right? So most of our students are going to need letters of recommendations, teacher, which will focus on the context of the classroom, counselors, which is all of us for the most part, heavily in the fall. We're writing, a given between 70 to maybe 90 letters of rec. So we want to make sure that we kind of educate our students to understand that there is a process, and we will share that information early on junior year to make sure that they know what they need from all of them. Now, their schools are going to not only need teacher recommendations, but also counselor recommendations. And there's an option maybe perhaps of a coach or pastor or supervisor. So that would be given and determined based on the university. Now, the essays, most of these universities will ask for essays for students to write. That is kind of the heart of the application, I would say. Personal essays, more about their students, which we obviously want to encourage them to, focus on themselves, be honest and transparent, because everyone's unique, and we want to make sure we emphasize that so they could actually have a strong essay about whatever the prompt is. Next, please. So timing and factors, we get this question asked quite a lot. What are the early action decision? Obviously, we always encourage students, depending on where they're at in the application process itself. Our most applications, a Common App, which is the most common, opens in August. So we always encourage students to start their search early, getting a list of colleges, just like Ms. Nguyen mentioned, to kind of determine if it's a school they want to target and apply early, meaning pretty much it could be as early as October 15th to November 1st. And that's all it means, right? You're acting early, applying early to find out early. There are some benefits of doing that. Readers are more fresh in the fall when you go early action. You will be showing more interest to these schools. You'll get it done early. I won't be saying you just get out of the way if that's the school you're kind of really focusing, and you'll find out early. Now, early decision, obviously the difference is you will probably commit earlier to the college, and we don't advise to that so much, just because even though there might be a higher interest of admissions, you're kind of not looking at all your options once you find out either early in the spring or even in December. Next, please. Now, resume factors, we do have that tool on Naviance, and I think it's important for our students. We do touch on it. It is an About Me on Naviance, and it's very useful for students. We here seniors have what's called a senior interview day, where they will need a resume eventually to prepare for the actual real world. We want to make sure they use it and put things that are meaningful within the activities. We want them to be familiar with the things they're involved in, right? So not necessarily if they're having any work experience, but also the things that they could add to build the resume for them when they need it. So any awards they're getting, any part of the competition, any projects, anything that's unique to each student, we want them to get familiar to adding them in that resume factor tool that we have on Naviance, so they can actually have not worry so much about adding all these things that they perhaps missed throughout the 4 years they're here. And I always tell students, you're going to have unique qualities and talents, so make sure you write those down, because not everyone's going to have the same interest or pathway you have. So please start working on that now, so you don't have to kind of go back and figure out everything you've done. Now, unique attributes, any special talents, any compelling stories, anything that you could actually make it unique about yourself. Next, please. Then finally, the demonstrated interest factors. We do encourage our students to attend our college Mater Day fair that happens September, October. We will be having that here on campus, having our students come, talk to the reps. We want to make sure that they're hearing from their action admissions reps to see programs that they're interested, touring the colleges, right? That's also a big one. We want them to schedule a personalized tour. It's very different than seeing the university online than to actually getting a tour and seeing and hearing the amazing programs they have. Attend when school's in session. That is also very important. They'll get to see the culture, the climate. The weather is a big one. A lot of students don't visit the schools, especially if it's not in California. They're going out of state. Visiting in the spring might be very different than visiting in the fall. So we want to encourage them to go ahead, and if there's opportunities, to go kind of get the field of the school. Open email. So once you start getting, I always tell my students, maybe create a professional email now that you're going to just use for the college search tool, right? Because you're going to get a lot of emails, and maybe could be very overwhelming. So I tell students, create one now so you could use specifically just for the colleges, and keep track on that, because schools will see if you're opening emails and showing that interest. Visit their websites, reach out to the reps. Those are all interest factors for them to kind of know how interested you are. And then the interview. So if it's an optional, we always suggest for them to do it. It adds value to your application. You actually want to have that opportunity to show your interest, your contributions to campus, everything that you don't get to probably share during the application. And just practice, but be your authentic self. I think that's the most important message. They want to see who you are and what you're bringing to their campus. I think I'm going to give it over to Mr. Waldo now.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Martinez. Just related to that, we have this quote from actually the senior assistant director of admissions from Northwestern University. So don't try to impress me, but instead make me want to cheer for you. So just as what Ms. Martinez said, each student, like, sure, you want to stand out, and that's very important. But it's also to highlight those unique attributes that we mentioned. Each student has a story to tell, and that's something that we want to help you convey to the college admissions office ultimately. So just wanted to give you this quote and just highlight what's helpful to focus on. And then from resources that we offer as a school, so we do have our college and counseling events calendar. Within these events, like we've included a list of these. So college fair, that's something that'll be happening in October. It happens every October here, where we have reps from all over the nation actually visit Mater Day and talk about their programs and meet with families one-on-one to highlight their school ultimately. We also have in-person and virtual rep visits where we have schools come in during lunchtime and set up their tables here on campus to talk with students again individually. So students do benefit from that one-on-one interaction where they can ask those questions that relate to their any questions that they have related to their college preferences, whether it's location, size, admissions, and all that. We are offering quarterly college chats as well as I think we've already mentioned the college awareness night case studies. So where we review or college reps are able to review their different admissions factors and highlight what they're looking for, what the trends are looking like, because we understand that they do change and sometimes they have specific preferences, whether it's through majors, specific programs that they want to highlight, impacted majors as we mentioned as well. We'll have college boot camps and application seminars. So I understand there will be essay writing workshops over the summer. So more information to come on that, as well as like application seminars where on a weekly basis during the fall, we as counselors will be available to students to help them out with college applications, whether it's the Common App, whether it's the UC application, Cal State application, or anything really. And then also keep in mind that we do have our college counseling resource page available on the Modern Day website, available to students and families as well. So a little bit about financial aid and scholarships. One thing I did want to mention was the net price calculator. So this is something that you can find on basically any college or university website that'll allow a student to put in their information um, and about themselves and find out what students in previous years, what they ended up paying for to attend that specific university after taking into consideration grants and scholarships. So it really gives them that net price that they will be paying again after considering all the scholarships and grants that they'll be offered. Prior year, what that basically means is um, for the FAFSA specifically, they are requiring the previous or 2 years before the current year. So I know that's a little confusing, but in regards to that is the tax returns. So you will be required to report for this year's seniors, they had to report the 2023 tax return. So again, it's always 2 years before of the current incoming year that they're attending college. FAFSA is the application for the federal aid, whether it's going to open up grants, state grants, federal grants, scholarships as well, loans as well. So all types of financial aid that students can fill out the application for. The CSS profile is a similar application to the FAFSA. It's for non-federal aid, so it's mainly for the institutional aid that they would find within the college itself. This includes also grants and scholarships and loans just available for that institution, for that particular university. Scholarships, again, those are widely available for a variety of whether it's academic scholarships, scholarships based on interests, hobbies, talents, anything. So they'll be able to find that. We also have a scholarship page linked on our Modern Day counseling website, so you'll be able to find more information about that as well. And then there's testing benefits, for example, doing well in the PSAT can qualify you for the National Merit Scholarship, depending on your score. So that's some of the benefits there. Um, and just not letting a big net price stop you from applying to a specific school. Um, Different schools offer scholarships of whether it's need-based, merit-based, and you'll just have to do more research on that, which we can help with. But again, don't let that be a barrier to apply to certain colleges. And again, the piece of advice is always apply for financial aid. Always use that FAFSA, whether you think you qualify for it or not. Finally, the use of independent consultants. So we've posed these questions, and if you can answer yes to come in, if you're able to, as a student or as a family, come in and ask questions when you need help, like come ask your modern day counselor. Are you able to attend your required meetings with your counselor? Are you able to attend events hosted by the art counseling department? And if you're finding yourself answering yes to these, then I mean, we would say this is more than enough to get that college like counseling aspect or the help make your needs met. But we're not like stopping you obviously from consulting with independent or college counselors. Their opinion is also valued. So if you do end up working with anyone outside, we also try to coordinate with them as well because what their recommendations are, we always try to align them with what we offer, whether it's class recommendations. So just something to consider when asking yourself, do I need to hire a college counselor or use someone else?
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Waldo. And at this time, I'm going to stop sharing. And we have Jonathan Mullally here to talk about testing. So thank you, Jonathan, for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. Thanks for having me here. A quick introduction to everybody. As Olivia said, my name is Jonathan Mullally. I've been preparing students for the SAT and the ACT exams for about 19 years at this point. So worked with many, many students over that time. I'm the founder of a company called Tried and True Tutoring. We've been in business since 2011, and we've had the honor of partnering with Modern Day to do presentations like this since I want to say about 2017. Um, a couple things I'll share really quickly. If there is anyone that is at some point interested in SAT or ACT preparation, we do offer that. We do offer small group classes. We also offer one-on-one tutoring as well. And if you're interested, you can learn a little bit about that here at our website. So I'll just share that really quickly so everybody can see that. If you're interested, you can learn about that at triedandtruetutoring.com. A couple other things I'll point out while I'm here on the website. This is something I'm going to be referencing frequently throughout the presentation. Under our resources tab, we have something called the SAT ACT Info Center. And if you go to this link, we basically have a college testing policies table here. And so as I get into this presentation, I'm going to be talking about, policies at a range of colleges, who is test optional, who requires tests, all of these kind of things. Obviously, we're not going to be able to go into the specifics of every individual college you might be interested in, but you can find the specifics of all the colleges right here in this table. So it's a free resource. I encourage you to take advantage of it. If you or your son or your daughter have some specific schools that they're interested in, you can pop them in the search here. We could look up Harvard and we could see, oh, I think I spelled it wrong. We could see, what are Harvard's policies? Okay, and we can find those very quickly. We can learn about which schools offer scholarships that require the SAT, which, we can filter which schools are test optional, which schools recommend, all of those kind of details. You can find many details. There's other useful blog articles in here. We've got other resources about SAT and ACT scholarships, all sorts of useful stuff. You don't need a login. You can just come in here anytime. It's totally free. And we do keep it updated. It's always completely up to date as things are evolving in the college testing landscape. So I just encourage everybody to look at that. Also, I'll say if you visit our website, we do have a mailing list. You can sign up for our newsletter. It's kind of down at the bottom of the homepage. We very, very rarely send out emails, but usually we'll send out emails when there are updates, when new colleges are announcing changes to their policies, or when there's new changes to the ACT coming out, things like that. So don't worry, we're not going to spam you or anything like that. Um, Now I'll go ahead and jump into the actual presentation itself, kind of get into the meat and potatoes of things. And I will say I'll be sharing this presentation with the Modern Day team, and I'm sure they're going to get it out to everybody afterwards. And so as I go through, you'll be able to get these slides. As we go through, you will find links in different places in the presentation, and these are just helpful things. So, anything that I'm talking about in a specific slide, you can click on that link and you can go to a resource that will go deeper or have more information on it. Actually, I'm going to get out of this for just a second and just maybe give everybody just a sense of the kind of the landscape overall. So SAT and ACT testing, as many of you are likely aware, used to be, very common, nearly ubiquitous. And what I would say is, up until the spring of 2020, almost exactly two-thirds of colleges, 66% of colleges and universities in the United States required either an SAT or an ACT exam. This all changed very dramatically and very quickly when COVID lockdowns hit, basically because students weren't able to test in person. So colleges couldn't really require students to submit a test. As a result of that, literally within weeks or maybe within about a month or so of COVID lockdowns, the percentage dropped from 66% requiring tests down to 1%. So a massive, massive drop, biggest change in college admissions really in generations. In the 5 years since then, we've seen this testing landscape slowly evolve. And this is kind of where things stand today here in the spring of 2025. So, and just to kind of give everybody a little bit of perspective, there's really 434 colleges that we track, and this pretty much includes all of the 4-year sort of let's see, mainstream 4-year colleges and universities. It doesn't include community colleges. It doesn't include very specialty colleges like College of Massage and things like that. But pretty much if you're looking at a 4-year university, it's almost guaranteed that it's going to be on this list of 434 schools. So these are the ones that we're looking at. So currently, spring of 2025, where do we stand? So right now, it's close to 10% of schools that right now require the SAT. That might sound like a small percentage, but as I said, about 5 years ago, it was 1%. And I should say, very interestingly enough, only about a year and a half ago, it was only about 3%. So in other words, what we've seen is just in about the past year and a half, we've seen that number increase by about 7%. So it started actually moving upward relatively quickly. And we've kind of gotten to the point now where there's maybe 2 or 3 colleges every month that are coming out and announcing that they've returned to requiring an SAT or an ACT exam. And so my best guess or my best estimate is that we are going to see that trend continue. And so if you are a sophomore, a 10th grader right now, the expectation would be that by the time you're taking tests, we're going to see a larger percentage. If you're a freshman, we're going to see a still larger percentage. I'm going to jump to the bottom here, what's called test free. These are the schools that they're not test optional. These are schools that actually just don't look at an SAT or an ACT at all. So you don't even really get the opportunity to submit it to them. They won't make an admissions decision based on a test one way or another. Now, I'll say this is primarily a California phenomenon. So this is basically, there are a few schools outside of California, but it's basically the public colleges, the public universities here in California, the UC system and the Cal State system that are test free. By the way, some people will refer to this as test blind, but that's correct. If you're really just targeting UCs and Cal States, then they will not be looking at SAT or ACTs at all. I will say one interesting thing, when you apply to a UC or a Cal State, they actually do in the application ask you, have you taken an SAT or an ACT? And if you select yes, if you say, yes, I have, they will actually ask you to input scores. So parents and students are often like, wait, I thought they weren't looking at tests. Why are they asking me about test scores? Well, it's because the UCs and the Cal States won't use test scores to make admissions decisions, meaning they won't decide whether you get in or don't get in based on a test score. But once you have been admitted, they can use that test score to make class placement decisions. In other words, your freshman year math, your freshman year English, let's say you did really well in your SAT math, that might bump you up to a higher math course your freshman year, that sort of a thing. But once again, they're not using it for admissions decisions. And my expectation is that these policies are probably going to remain in place for the foreseeable future. So I would say for our sophomores and even our freshmen, these policies will likely still remain in place, when it comes time for you to test and submit scores. In the middle, this is kind of where the big questions come in. We have all these schools that are test optional. And if you're not familiar with this, it means exactly what it sounds like. It's optional. You have the option. You can submit a test score, but you don't have to submit a test score. And we sort of divide these into three different pools. About 21% are temporarily test optional, meaning these are schools that have a test optional policy right now, but that have expressed or, in some cases set specific dates saying, hey, we're going to be reviewing and potentially updating these policies at a future date. So I would say for our 11th graders, for our juniors, like this number is probably pretty solid. But the expectation would be for the 10th and 11th grader, the 10th and the 9th graders in this presentation, it's very likely that many of these temporarily test optional schools, some of them might return to requiring an SAT or an ACT, and some of them over these next couple of years might become permanently test optional. There are currently, as you can see, it's about 53% of the schools on our list are permanently test optional, which is a bump because prior to COVID, prior to the lockdowns, it was about 33% of colleges that were permanently test optional. So we have seen that category grow by about 50%. I'm sorry, by about 20%. Finally, this is the most interesting category, what we call test optional for some. These are colleges that are test optional, but maybe only for specific categories of students. A lot of people look at that and say, well, that doesn't sound fair. You're requiring tests from some students and not requiring it from others. I'll give you a couple of examples of this. So there are some state schools, not here in California, but in certain other states, where the state school might be test optional for students from within their state, but they might require a test for students from outside of their state. So that's one example. We've also seen some examples of schools where they might require a test from homeschool students. Now, that's probably not going to apply to you if you're attending Mater Dei, but that is a category out there. One of the other categories that we've seen are circumstances where the university as a whole might be test optional, but like the School of Engineering might highly recommend that you submit a test. We've seen a few of those cases. And of course, if they're highly recommending it, in my book, like you really should be sending the test. But so anyway, just so you're aware, there are some of those schools. Once again, if you go to our website, you go to the SAT ACT Info Center, that table that I showed you, you can run a filter and you can very quickly see exactly what these schools are. You can also click a link to go to their web pages and kind of read the details and understand exactly what they mean by those policies. Okay. So this is sort of the current landscape as it stands. So obviously, if you're applying to schools that require a test, you're going to need a test. If they're test-free, you're not going to need a test. But as you can see, right now, the bulk of the schools are test optional. So what do we know about these test optional schools? So I'll dig in a little bit more. So the first thing we want to kind of ask is, like, is there a value? Is there some value to submitting tests to test optional schools? And I'll say, the first thing we'll look at, I'll say there's very limited amount of data on this. I'm basically showing you all the data. Most schools have really kind of held this data close to their chest, but we can kind of look at this. And what this is showing us, let's say Vanderbilt University last year, out of all the students who applied to Vanderbilt, 56% sent in a test. Of the students who did submit a test, 7.3% were admitted. Of the students who did not submit a test, 6% were admitted. So it would look like, okay, there's a slight advantage for the test submitters. And as we go down the list, we can see the examples get a little bit more extreme. BC would be the most extreme example, where of the students who submitted a score, about 26% were admitted, where of the students who did not submit a score, only about 10%. So if you're going to BC, or if that's one of your top choices, it might be really, really beneficial. So anyways, we can see some examples where it does seem that the students who are submitting tests are seeing better outcomes at certain universities. The second thing we'll say is that outside of requiring tests for admissions, there are also many schools that they might be test optional for admissions, but they might require a test for their significant scholarships. In fact, about 18% of the schools in our database have scholarships that require an SAT or an ACT score. So it seems that on two fronts, there might be benefits to having a good score. It might aid you in admissions, and it might help you paying for college, getting scholarships, things like that. And so that kind of brings me to the first big question that most people are asking. Hey, if I'm just targeting a bunch of test optional schools, should I test? And my recommendation to everyone is a very simple and straightforward recommendation. I would say yes. I think every student owes it to him or herself to go out there and take at least one test. Go out there and try your best on at least one SAT or ACT exam. If you do well on it, it can definitely benefit you. And here's the great news. If you go out, you get a score, and maybe you're not all that proud about it, you don't really want to share it with anybody, guess what? No one needs to see it. You don't need to send it anywhere. So there's really no downside. I think every student should test. So let's say you take my advice, you take a test. How do you know if you should submit your scores? Well, I think there's a couple things. If you're looking at test optional schools, the first thing I would recommend that you do is read the school's statements on testing. Because some schools are test optional, but then when you read what they have to say about test optional, you kind of get the sense that, seems like they might like to see a score. For example, Duke, I'll just kind of focus on this last line here. Whoops, I kind of went forward. They say test scores do add information that admissions officers find useful in assessing a student's preparation and how a student compares to the applicant pool as a whole. There were certainly some students where we wish we'd had scores and we didn't. So I read that and I'm like, if my son is applying to Duke and he can come up with a decent score, I'm probably going to want to send him a score. By the way, once again, if you go to our SAT ACT Info Center, to that table, you can literally, through that table, click links and it will take you straight to the testing pages of all these different colleges. So you can read in their own words what they have to say about it. So I highly recommend that, come up with a list of schools and read what they have to say. Some other things to think about, I'll just kind of focus on the most important. If your son or daughter tests and their scores are above average for the schools that they're interested in applying to, I would say they most likely want to submit the scores. Also, if they have scores that are above average for their high school, for Mater Dei, you likely want to submit those scores as well. And maybe another important point is if you've got a blemish somewhere on your transcript, maybe you had one rough semester or one rough grade here or there, a strong SAT or ACT score can compensate for that. To be clear, I'm not saying, if you had 4 years of relatively low grades and then you get an amazing ACT score, that's going to compensate. That's not what I'm saying. But if you just have a rough patch here or there, it can compensate. If anybody is interested in really a deeper understanding of these guidelines, we do have a blog on this that kind of goes in depth to a lot of things to consider when deciding whether or not to submit a score to a test optional school. So I encourage you to check that out. But the ones I've kind of gone through right here, these are the real big pieces. Okay, I've got just a couple minutes left. And so with my time, I would love to just touch upon just some of the basics of the tests overall. We've kind of talked about the testing landscape, but this whole time I've been talking about SAT, ACT. What are the basics of these tests? Well, the first question a lot of folks will ask me is, which of these is more widely accepted, SAT or ACT? And a lot of folks are surprised to hear that the answer is neither. At this point in time, and I know it used to be different years ago, but at this point in time, colleges really don't care. Every college that accepts a test will accept either test, SAT or ACT. So if that's the case, then which one should you take? I would recommend you take the test that you're performing best on. And how do you know which one you're performing best on? By taking practice exams. You can do this. I'm sure Modern Day offers a PSAT in the fall. That's a great chance to see how you perform on the real SAT. There's also many ways you can take a practice ACT online. One thing I'll also offer to everybody, if you're interested in it, you can take free full-length SAT and ACT exams online, once again, totally for free, through our website if it's something you're interested in. Maybe you took a PSAT already and you'd like to get an ACT score to compare it with. I encourage you to do that. I think that's the first thing really in the test prep process, is figuring out which test you're best at. And when I send these slides out, you will have this concordance table. This will allow you to compare the scores between the two. Kind of running out of time here, so to just kind of wrap things up really, really quickly, I'm gonna maybe just jump ahead to the testing timelines, because I think that's probably one of the most critical pieces. So many folks want to know a couple things. How many times can you take the test? The truth is, you can take these tests as many times as you want. As I said earlier, I would recommend taking it at least one time. But if you have decided that these tests might be valuable for you in admissions, I would recommend thinking about taking it 2 to 3 times, because the statistics bear out that if a student is preparing for the test thoughtfully, we could see a significant score increase from a first test to a third test, a first test to a second test to a third test. A lot of times it doesn't make much sense to go much longer than that, but if these are going to be valuable for you in admissions, you might want to think about doing it 2 to 3 times. When do you need to be done? You're going to need to be done in most cases by December of your senior year. Now, if you're doing some of those early applications, early decision, early admissions, any of those things, you might need to be done earlier than that, because you might be submitting and applying earlier than that. So what does that mean for most students? The majority of students are going to be taking their first official SAT or ACT exam in the spring of their 11th grade. And this still gives them some opportunities. If they want to take a second test, they can maybe take a second one a little bit later in the spring or during the summer. And if they need to take a third, they still have some opportunities in the fall of the 12th grade to take a third test. And I would say that's the most typical. There are some students that might start a little bit earlier. There might be some that start a little bit later. But I'd say for a good 85% of students, taking that first test, official test in the spring of 11th grade is a great idea. These are the testing dates. Now, these are the testing dates for the current year, so they're not really going to apply to our 10th and 11th graders, but just be aware that the dates look almost exactly the same almost every year. So in other words, what I'm saying is, let's say you take some practice tests and you decided that the ACT is the best fit for you. When it comes time for spring of your junior year, there will likely be a February ACT, an April ACT, a June, et cetera, et cetera. One thing I do want to mention before I wrap things up, you'll notice that there are some registration deadlines. You need to be registered by the registration deadline, but to be clear, you cannot afford to wait until that registration deadline, especially here in California, because one of the things that we've seen over the last few years is that these testing centers get really, really impacted and they get booked up very, very early. So if you wait till the registration deadline, you're not going to be able to get a spot at a testing center that's located close to you. So for example, we've had students who live in Orange County who end up driving to Bakersfield or even to Arizona in some cases to take an exam because there's just nothing, everything's booked up, there's nothing available. And so my general recommendation is if you do have a specific test date you're going to target, it's a great idea to try to book that like 3 months ahead of time if possible. And then you're likely going to be able to find a testing spot that is located very, very close to you. All right. I'm going to wrap things up because I know we're already past 1 p.m. But there's much more I could talk about. But I just want to thank everybody for giving me this opportunity to share.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.